Come to me, all you who labour and are overburdened. Over the last few months, many of us have probably felt burdened by what has happened. It's been a challenging time for people right across the whole world. It's been a challenging time for people's health. It's been a challenging time for the distancing that we've been forced to create even within our own families, where grandparents haven't been able to see their grandchildren, where parents sometimes haven't been able to embrace their children. Some of you have gone through this. We've had the problems with our economy as well, and then in other parts of the world, thousands of people millions have died. It's been a hard time, and it's continuing to be a hard time even in Victoria at the moment. We have felt burdened by this. In recent times, in the last sort of 50 years or so, we've had a better perspective or a better sense of mental health, and we're starting to talk about that more and more. However, Jesus was talking about that 2,000 years ago. Come to me, all you who labour and are overburdened. What's he talking about? He's not just talking about the people who are the labourers, who are carrying their bricks and working out on the fields. He was talking about people's emotions, people's psyche, people's spirit. And we can all be impacted. We have all been impacted by what's happened over the last few months. So it's fantastic, and thank you for those who are here today who've taken that step to come out and to come. Jesus asks us to come out of that isolation and to form a community. Because in being a community of followers of Jesus Christ, we know that the Holy Spirit makes a home within us. And being a home, it's not just something that's a house, that it's a place for us to be by ourselves. A home is a place of community. A home is a place of family. And that's what we create by being part of this life of Jesus Christ. So it's great that you're here today. This Sunday is Aboriginal Sunday. It's also the 14th Sunday in Ordinary Time. When people from Europe first came to Australia, they thought that this was no one's land. You probably know terra nullius is what they sometimes referred to it as. It was no one's land. No one had claimed it. And they had this idea to a certain extent that the people here, the Indigenous people, was sort of a little childish perhaps. They didn't have the same structures of civilization that Europe perhaps knew. But over the last 250 years, we've become more and more knowledgeable of the Indigenous people. And the Indigenous people have become more knowledgeable of those who've come from overseas, from wherever we've come from. The Spirit, as we heard in this second reading today, so Paul writing to the Romans, your interests are not in the unspiritual, but in the spiritual, since the Spirit of God has made his home in you. One of the beautiful things, the more that we look, the more we interact with the Indigenous communities in this area, but right across this beautiful continent, is that the Spirit of God is present within the Indigenous people. Before Christian missionaries came here, God had already revealed himself to the Indigenous people here in Australia. The Spirit of God has been at work. And one of the beautiful things for us as Catholics, as Christians, to connect with the Indigenous people of this country is that we know that the Spirit that's working in us has been working in them as well. Even before Christian missionaries came and preached, God was present here. And they realized this. They were already gathering together as communities for worship, like we're doing right now. They didn't have the words of Christian language. They didn't have the rituals that we would understand that what we're doing here is what Jesus had done. But God had already moved their hearts to worship. God had already touched their hearts to form not just a community of individuals, but a community worshiping God. The Spirit of God had made a home within the people of this land. And it was unfortunate, I think, that when the first discoverers, or however you want to refer to them, Captain Cook and others arrived here, they didn't necessarily see that spirit. They didn't recognize that spirit that was dwelling already here. And it's a beautiful spirit. Unfortunately, over the 250 years of European interaction, sometimes Europeans and others have caused burdens to the Indigenous people in lots of ways. Some of them have been overburdened by the experiences. Some of them have been ostracised. We know the history. And they feel that. And I think we feel that too. But we also know over the last 250 years, there have been many, many good people who recognise that the Spirit of God is dwelling in us, but the Spirit of God is dwelling in others as well. And that we want to form a community of God's people in this land, in this world. The prophet Zechariah, our first reading today, said, God's empire shall stretch from sea to sea, from the river to the ends of the earth. This is what happens in this land. And many good people, many of you who are here today, we know that the Spirit of God is not just owned by me or you, but God has revealed himself in many, many different ways. Come to me, all you who labour and are overburdened. Jesus says, I will give you rest. If you felt burdened over the last few months, know that this was normal. If you felt isolated, you felt separated from community and even from the Spirit of God at times, know that you're not alone. It's great that people have been able to come back. Let us do what we can now to come safely, but to walk safely and carefully on this land with our Indigenous brothers and sisters as well. The Spirit of God has made a home in us and in others. Let us allow that Spirit to shine out today. Let us allow it to shine out in the days, the weeks ahead. Let us courageously go into the world proclaiming the good news, the love of Jesus Christ.